come to do some big things.
Fantastic. Christina, you've worked in a variety of roles, haven't you? She now works as head of family for the Centre of Social Justice. They've written a fantastic paper called Mothers, or is it Mothers Know Best? Or Parents Know Best. Anyway, you're a fantastic advocate, and I'm going to leave it to you because you've got 5 minutes.
Thank you so much. I don't usually wear a dragon, but it was the best I could do in terms of, the Duchess apparently wants a dress that goes all the way to the floor, and this almost does. But at least I didn't have to trip up the stairs here. I really care about this issue because I'm the head of the family policy unit at the Centre for Social Justice, and we look at research upon research upon research and do our own research on issues like raising children. And again, it strikes me that when it comes to raising children, politicians in Westminster are over there, and ordinary families are over here. And that gulf is something that we have to overcome, and a group like Mothers at Home Matters really helps raise the issue and build that bridge over the gulf. When you look at what politicians want, they look at our children as if they were tiny hindrances, tiny obstacles that are stopping us, the drones, from droning. We look at children as our life's work. They look at children as if they were blocking us from real work. And that is absolutely not the way we, ordinary people, see children. We see them as our life's work, but also as an incredible future generation that we can help instill values into, that we can help support so that they thrive and flourish and create a flourishing society for all. About 11 months ago, we, the Centre for Social Justice, got together with Public First, a big polling firm, and we asked 1,035 parents, what do you think government should be doing? What do you want government to do in order to support you as a family? And 81% of parents said, we would like to spend more time with our children, especially when they're younger. 76% of parents said, could the government please give us the opportunity to get all these benefits that they talk about for childcare, but to be able to use them as we see fit. So that might mean, ta-da, paying grandparents, or paying neighbors, or family friends, rather than pushing them into formal care. About 67% of parents said, please, could government support those of us who see going back, being rushed and pushed to go back to work immediately after having a child? Could we have a pause during which mom or dad gets to stay at home for those crucial early years? Now, it's often said that this government likes to be led by evidence. Baloney. Because if they were, they would know that neuroscience shows that for good, positive, cognitive development, a child needs a constant, nurturing presence, especially in those first years, but actually, adolescence can be very tricky too. And what we mean by positive cognitive development is a human being who knows right from wrong, who knows how to be conscious of their urges and instincts and knows how to control them, who is socialized, who knows that they are to invest in society and in the wider world. When a child doesn't have that incredibly strong attachment, that incredibly good constructive relationship in their background, they are that much more likely, and this is evidence-based, they are that much more likely to exhibit antisocial behavior, to do poorly at school, to stay away from school, to join gangs, and ultimately even to get in trouble with the police. So evidence is on our side, not on the politician side. However, what the politicians have decided is to ignore what the neuroscientists say. And here is the menu, according to government, for childcare. From next April, working parents with 2-year-old children will be able to access 15 hours of free childcare. From September, this will be extended to working parents of children as young as 9 months. So 9 months old, put into a formal childcare setting with maybe 20, 25 other children, and I'm sure professional childminders, but that's not parenting. And we mustn't allow government to call it parenting, because it's not. The unintended consequences of this policy are alarming, because even the DFE, the Department of Education, has admitted that the home learning environment has more of an impact on a child's outcomes than even their parents' earnings or professional status. So home learning environment means, as we said, a constant, loving, nurturing presence in the home. This is not to say that we overlook the fact that for some parents, both salaries are necessary just to keep food on the table. Of course, we recognize that. But what we would like at the Center for Social Justice, and I think also here at Mothers at Home Matter, is the ability to choose, to have a government that supports our choice when that choice is, you know what, I want to stay with my children. I would like to help them grow up under my loving eye, with me instilling the values that I recognize as really important, rather than ship them off to a formal setting. And this choice is what we are arguing for, not only in the report that Anne Fennell has just mentioned, which is called Parents Know Best, but in a forthcoming report, again with fresh research, fresh surveys, that is going to be called A New Deal for Families. And what we call for is, government, could you give us a budget with which we can choose to pay ourselves or our granny or our neighbor, rather than push our child into a formal childcare setting. That is what choice is all about. That is why we are trying to amass as much evidence as possible. And I have to say, it's a mountain to climb, and it's a difficult mountain to climb, because when you look around the palaces of Westminster, apart from the wonderful Miriam Case, who is, I think, coming any second now, but apart from Miriam Cates, it is really difficult to find anybody who champions this policy. It's short-sighted of them, it's materialistic of them, because they're valuing us only as the cogs in the economic wheel. But there we are. So I urge you to campaign on this issue, let your voices be heard, and let's try to bridge that gulf that divides ordinary people from Westminster politicians. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Christina. Do you have to shoot?
Also, I said to the spectator online that I was coming here. And I said, this is an issue that really needs some welly. If any of you have any interesting anecdotes or quotes, Anne knows how to reach me. I'm going to be writing it all night.
We'll get them to you.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Christina. A round of applause. Thank you. And it's very kind of you to pop in. It's amazing in your very busy schedule. Thank you so much. Shall we go straight to the politics? Yeah, I have got some notes somewhere. But we've got quite a few people who'd like to hear from in this session. Got some oh no, that's not my. I just come, as you know, from the meeting, which was really interesting. Unfortunately, I didn't have time to stay for questions. I had to run down here, so I missed the bit. But one thing that was really interesting, which I didn't know, and I found out from this meeting, is that well, I did know that the childcare providers are not happy with the latest government policies. But one thing that's emerging is that more and more voluntary sort of nurseries are closing down, and 70% now of the market are profit-run nurseries, which is not so great, really. They don't. I mean, the underlying motive is profit. So you know that combined, and a lot of the childcare providers were saying that the needs of the children are not the primary focus, and that's the childcare providers, and that's not even us. So, you know, maybe we can work alongside them as well, because they were also pointing out that the needs of the children are not at the forefront of these policies. So, yeah. So anyway, this afternoon we're looking at mothering and politics. I'd just like to put up a few slides just to give a sort of a rounded picture. We are sort of facing a cost of living crisis. A lot of families can't afford to be home on one income. And I'd just like to show you the slides, which my husband very kindly put together for me, so thank you. So currently there are only about 25% of mothers at home. 1 in 4 mothers are at home. 75% of mothers are in work, either part-time or full-time. That's gone down from about, I can't remember, 60% or 60+% in 1990 and 38% 2010. So it's been a declining figure, and sort of government policies are pushing it that way. And when I started campaigning, I've got Marie and Lynn at the back there, you know, from 10 years ago, mothers were saying the same thing 10 years ago. We would like to stay at home longer, and it's just gone the other way. There's been more and more incentives to go out to work, and we've just seen declining numbers. I think that's 0 to 4, but I don't know actually, because the statistics we're looking at 0 to 14, so I can't be 100% sure. But I think it's, no, I don't know. Good question. Good question. The next slide. Can we just look at the next slide? Yeah. So the narrative that's you often hear in the papers is that half of all mothers at home want to be out at work and can't afford childcare. But if you look at this, you know, if you look at this graph, of the mothers at home, if half of them want to go out to work, we're only talking about 1/8 of all mothers. When you ask the question to working mothers, if I could afford to, I would prefer to look after my own children and work less. 42% of mothers said, yes, I would rather stay at home. 42% of the working mothers said, I'd rather be able to stay at home. This is for 0 to 4-year-olds with children 0 to 4. The majority, 2/3, said they would like to work fewer hours, so that includes the whole of that half. And only sort of 34% said that that they would prefer to work more hours, of which, if we go to the next slide, affordable childcare being the barrier was only a small percentage of that. So really, if you're looking at a policy which is saying mothers can't afford to work because of childcare, we're really looking only at this this section here, which is only about 25% of mothers who are saying, anyway, that it's affordable childcare that is stopping them working. So the policy focus is firstly all wrong anyway, but it's actually focusing on a very narrow group of mothers. So we've worked closely with quite a few organisations now, trying to, one, change the narrative, and two, particularly look at the tax system. I'd like to ask first, we've got lots of people here, like Elizabeth in a minute, but firstly Don and Leonard, they have formed Tax and the Family, an organisation, a charity rather, trying to raise awareness of the penalties in the tax system. And currently they're looking at the child benefit because it's a really unfair tax. And I just wonder if you'd like to come and speak about it, Leonard. They're both absolutely amazing. They work tirelessly. They're, if I don't mind me saying, about to be 90 next year, and they're still going. They're wonderful. They both used to work in the Inland Revenue, is that right? And they do know the tax system very well.
Well, what I want to say fits in very well with what we've just heard in the last few minutes, because the issue over taxation and why it is unfair is because in the eyes of the Treasury, mothers at home don't matter. And of course we've got to put that right. And I'm sure you will do that better, and your organisations will do it better. But the issue is, we all live in families, in households, and that is the way in which government policy generally is structured, and the benefit system is structured. But when you come to income tax, no, we don't look at the family, we look at individuals. And that means that when you look at the tax system, a family with both parents out at work will get 2 sets of allowances, and a family with only one parent, in paid work, will get only 1 set of allowances. And that means to say the whole tax system is unfair to mothers who stay at home. And we can go through why we've done, well, Don in particular, but we've done a lot of research over a wide area. But I just wanted to say 2 things today which are particularly relevant to mothers at home. The first is when independent taxation was introduced in the 1980s, the original plan was that when a parent stayed at home and was not in paid work, their allowance could be transferred to the parent, normally the husband, in paid work. But unfortunately, in the course of the policy being developed, that was dropped. And it was dropped because Margaret Thatcher in particular thought that everybody ought to be out in paid work. And so the disincentive, as it were, for parents to stay at home was in fact removed. Now, looking forward to 2014, George Osborne was forced by the Conservative Manifesto in 2010 to reintroduce that allowance, but he did so in an extraordinarily niggardly basis. It's only 1/10 of the allowance can be transferred. It's only for married couples, not for cohabiting couples, whereas if you look at the benefit system treats cohabiting couples in the same way as married couples. not the tax system. And there's also this very unfair cliff edge at the end, is that if the husband has £1 of income liable to higher rate tax, then the allowance is taken away completely. It's not phased away, it's taken away completely. So what we really want is for that marriage allowance to be brought back to the original idea of the transfer allowance, i.e. it should be given in full, or if that's too expensive, to be increased over a period of time, to be in full, to apply not only to married couples but to cohabiting couples, and for the cliff edge withdrawal to be removed and replaced by a marginal phasing out. And that would then mean that the tax system, still not really what we would want, but it would remove a lot of the current bias against mothers who stay at home. The second point which we wanted to make today, that is specific reference, a specific relevance to mothers at home, is this iniquitous high income child benefit charge, well, so-called high income, because it was not fit for purpose when it was introduced in 2012, and because the threshold has not been increased in line with inflation, threshold is 50,000, it now should be about 65,000, all the problems in it have become a lot worse. But there is a specific problem that has arisen right from the beginning, that a two-earner couple can each earn, say, £45,000, so their combined income is 90,000, say, and not be affected by it. But a single earner, whether a lone parent or a mother at home, has only got to have a partner that has an income of 50,000, and then immediately is liable to the charge. And the effect of that is that the charge runs a long way down the income scale. It is called the high income child benefit charge because its purpose was to apply only to the best of 15%. But in actual fact, what has happened is that it, depending on your exact circumstances, it can affect people who have roughly got the medium or the average standard of income. And so it is very unfair. It was unfair when introduced in 2012, and it's more unfair today. And the government have never sought to defend the unfairness. They just say it would be impractical to do anything about it. So they don't bother to defend it. Oh, no, 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 no. So we have put forward a proposal that the threshold would depend, a single person, whether a lone parent or a single earner in a couple, would get a higher threshold than the two-earner couple. And I think that there could be a debate as to how much higher it should be. You could say it should be double because of two people. But at least that is an approach which the government have never thought, I don't know, they might have thought about it, but in public, they simply say, nothing can be done, full stop. And so that they're prepared to accept the unfairness. Well, in our view, we've got to find ways and means of putting these ideas forward, because it's not good enough just to say, well, the tax system may be unfair, but we're going to do nothing about it. So I do hope that with your help, Anne, we shall find ways of putting that forward. Sorry. Could I just say, we have done a leaflet which some people have now got, but if you've not got one, please can you ask Don or myself? We'll certainly be delighted to give you one.
Thanks, Don. Thank you. There's so much we could say about tax, but it's a really complex and quite a big subject. It affects particularly people on universal credit because of these very high marginal tax rates, which I won't go into now, but Don and Leonard have helped me to understand it. And one of the really difficult things about this is that it stops the main earner or single person or from earning more money, because the more you earn, the more you have to give back to the Treasury, so you don't actually see much more disposable income by working harder. And this is also the effect which happens when you reach 50,000 and you start losing your child benefit. It's the same effect. The more you earn, you don't actually bring home extra disposable income, which today on 50,000 in London or in a major city is not very much, especially when you've got rents of £2,000 a month. So it really does affect people, and it affects people's ability to choose how they live their lives. So it really is something that does need changing. So we will be campaigning for change to child benefit. Yeah, Lynn, you've got a question? Yeah.
Thank you. I've been on the committee of Mothers at Home Matter for 15 years, and it suddenly occurred to me today that we've had a déjà vu moment. We've got a Mr. Cameron back in office. Well, Mr. Cameron was back in office back in 2010, 2012, and it was under his guise, under his government, that this policy was brought in, that the child benefit was taken away. And we, as an organisation, we had about a 2-week period, I think, that we were all over the newspapers. Everybody wanted to know about our organisation. It's really sad that, since 2010, nothing's happened. And as Leonard's been saying, we haven't progressed this. And this is a real problem. The government, and, we've now got David Cameron back in government, and hey-ho, I and a group of 5 of us marched on Downing Street back at the time, and we gave him a Mother's Day card that Marie, my dear friend and colleague here, came up with, and we handed in a Mother's Day card. We never got an answer. It's a real shame, but hey, government needs to change, and I know that we've got Miriam Cates just come in from the government, and it would be wonderful if something could move on this, because we really are being penalised as a group, and we need to change. It does need to change.
Hi, me again. I've been quite political ever since I started working with mums. I've got one petition about recognition of matrescence, which means the transition to motherhood, for those that don't know it. But this is particularly relating to the benefits, the universal credit. Mothers at Home Matter very kindly shared some posts I did. I set up a petition back in April when it was revealed that for people, single parents particularly, on universal credit, the amount of hours they would have to work in a week to keep any benefits was rising from 16 hours to 30 hours. So my petition closed on the 24th of October. On the 25th of October, the DWP brought in the changes anyway. So I'm working with another campaign group called Single Parent Rights. If you go and find Mothers Uncovered on any social media, you'll see that. So there's a survey on their site. There's a right to the MP letter. we are putting together another letter that we're planning to send to Parliament, and I think I emailed you about being on that. Just on the subject of social media, I do have a TikTok account. I'm obviously 400 years too old for TikTok, but I put a little video of me talking about the changes, which has had 260,000 views and well over 1,000 comments, mostly from the poorest people in society saying, I can't go on. So if anyone does have TikTok and just goes and looks under my name, Maggie Gordon Walker, you will see it. So I've been screenshotting them and sharing these comments because it's just heartbreaking. People are on their knees. So, you know, as many other people said, things have to change. So, yeah, please go look me up, do connect in any way. And if you can fill in the survey or can share with someone who does, very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Maggie. Yes, there are penalties coming on universal credit, and also there's two things. One, it's forcing mothers back to work when their child is 3. The other thing is also taking away the additional earnings threshold, so that in the past, if you're in a couple, the husband could make up the hours or make up the time. I think you had an earnings threshold that you were allowed to have. Now they're taking that away, and so both of you have to work for 30 hours, I think, if I'm right. One partner can't make up the hours or time. And there was one other thing. Oh yes, and just the fact that you're penalised if you come together as a couple. So you're better off being apart than being together. This is another crazy thing about our tax and benefit system. You know, there would be many less single mothers if it was better to be together. I think you're better off by about £12,000 if you're apart. So that's another thing that I think we've got to change. Anyway, so moving on now. We did invite the Minister for Children. I don't know if he's changed. He's probably changed now, hasn't he, in the latest reshuffle. Who declined. We also invited the Shadow Minister for the Labour, Helen Hayes, who didn't reply, and the Lib Dem, Munira Wilson, who couldn't make it either. So we don't have any one of those, but we're really delighted to welcome, we've got 2 people here. One is an old friend of mine, Liz Dukes, from the Lib Dem. She works in the Lib Dem policy, federal policy. We met about 13 years ago at one of the Lib Dem conferences. I think I had a very small meeting trying to persuade them to incorporate choice into their childcare proposals. And Liz was there championing me and saying, yes, come on, Anne, let's go for it. So that was really great. She's here today. I think we did about 3 conferences then, didn't we? She is just going to say a few words, and then also I'm going to ask Miriam to come up as well, and she's been a really great advocate for us. Very, very difficult to find any politicians to advocate, so we're grateful to have these 2 here today.
I was a bit annoyed really when I heard that there is no political party as interested in mothers, because I have to say, having just been on the working group for creating a policy for under 5s, that the Lib Dems do care. And if you look at the policy that we voted for at our conference in September, it includes doubling maternity benefit to £350 a week, lengthening the time you can get it to 46 weeks, and giving mothers the choice to spend time with their children. And I think I mean, I'm probably best known as the person who campaigned to have the income tax threshold raised. When I started in 2008, the income tax threshold was £120 a week. That the then Labour government thought that people earning more than £120 should pay tax. And I campaigned and said nobody on the minimum wage should pay tax. And I succeeded. And there it is. It's now created this gulf that people with only one earner suddenly unnoticed this huge draft. And I personally would very much like the return of the additional person's allowance. Now, many, many years ago, because I'm really quite old, we used to get, well, we called it the married man's allowance. So if a man got married, his tax allowance went up. Was it doubled? Well, I think it was something like doubled. So as long as you had a wife, you had more, you paid less tax. But if you weren't married and you had a child, you were given this allowance. So in fact, it's a children's allowance. And I'm like, well, do you know how much they cost? Should we not get a tax allowance for having children? And I think I would very much like to see the return of that. And as for the complete iniquity that is the child benefit, anybody earning 50,000, the Lib Dems are completely, utterly opposed to that. And we would return that to anybody because, as Leonard so carefully said, earn 50,000 and you don't get it. Earn 95,000 and you do. Yeah, you explain that one to me. But the Lib Dems are very keen on seeing more informal childcare. Because I think for a lot of mums, I've got 4 children, I worked a lot of the time, but I never worked full-time. I've only ever worked part-time. And so therefore, childminders and informal childcare, I valued much more than the nurseries, which I found just too cold and professional. And in the Lib Dems, we would really like to see it made much easier to become a childminder. It's much simpler, much less bureaucracy. And that does 2 things. It creates an income for women who want to stay at home with their children, and it creates a much more family-centred childcare for those of us who don't want to be putting our children into a nursery where, as Anne said, the bottom line is profit. So,
do you think we might see something in the next manifesto about supporting mothers at all?
Well, I hope so, because I'm on the Federal Policy Committee, and obviously I will get to write the manifesto. But the thing is that if you want to see political change, you are going to have to bring this about. I became involved in politics when my youngest child was about 4, or my eldest child was 4, because I realised that the only way to make a difference is to be in the room. It's to be one of those people making those decisions. And if you want to see that change, you need to join a political party, because that's how we get political change in this country. And you have to be there making the decisions. And I really would encourage you, because political parties are predominantly male. And we could really change Britain if we had far more women involved in politics. I mean, okay, I do national politics, but there's local politics. It could make a really big difference if you're the person deciding where the council tax is being spent. You really can. And obviously, you could be somebody like me who's writing the manifesto for the next general election. So, what's stopping you?
Thank you. Well, I'll be feeding you some policies then to put into your manifesto. And now I'd like to ask Miriam to come to the floor. She's been in the papers loads. I'm sure you've all seen her making headlines. Miriam, just thank you for all your advocating for us. We haven't really had such a vocal and enthusiastic champion, and I think I'll just leave it to you to say a few words.
Thanks, Anne. Thanks. Thank you. And it's a real honour to be here. And I think before I start as a politician, just as a mum, I just want to say thank you so much for all you do. And there is no greater contribution you can make to society than to be a mum and to spend that time with your children in their early years. I was really fortunate enough to have that privilege. I've got 3 children. They're 15, nearly 13 and 9. And for most of the first 5 years of their lives, I was able to not work. I did work part-time, but was able to have the privilege of being with them most of the time. And I do not regret it. For a minute, it's far more important than anything I did as a teacher or now as an MP for them. So thank you so much, and please keep doing what you're doing, because it might feel like no one is listening sometimes, but you really are making a difference. And we've seen Anne loads in Parliament recently and at conferences and different events, and their voice is really being heard. So, I mean, you're all sitting here thinking, how the heck can it be so bad? And it is. You know, you've heard the tax system explained, we've heard the childcare system, seems to be all about getting mothers back into the workplace to contribute to this mythical GDP figure. Things are terrible for mothers, and for stay-at-home mothers particularly. So I just want to spend a couple of minutes to try and explore why that is, because you kind of have to know why something's wrong in order to work out how to fix it. I think there are several reasons for that. I do think, what was the lady who just spoke called? I didn't catch her name. Liz, I do think there's something about who's in the room. That's absolutely right. I don't think it's just a lack of women in the room. I think it's a lack of mothers. So, for example, the Labour Party is over half women now. More than half of their MPs are women, about 30% of the Conservative Party. There are plenty of women at high levels now. But that's not to say that there are mothers who did stay at home with their children, who wanted to stay at home with their children. And the vast majority of women who make it into public life do have the kind of careers where they have, it's completely their choice, but they have paid for nannies and they have used that kind of childcare that they absolutely have wanted to use, and that's fine, but that's not most women. And so I think if you look at, for example, how COVID policy was made, and I'm sure you've all seen the WhatsApp messages leaked to the media and everything like that, but there were no mothers in the room. There were no mothers saying, how on earth are our children supposed to cope with this? What does it mean for a pregnant woman giving birth without her partner by her side? What does it mean to shut down all the baby groups and all the health visitors? There was nobody saying that. And I think it's not just not enough women in the room, it's not enough mothers in the room. So I think that is the first problem. And there's an obvious reason for that, because we want to be with our children. We don't want to be in Westminster 5 days a week, So that is an obvious cause. I think secondly, we've just got completely the wrong narrative in this country about children, and we see children as mini adults with rights rather than understanding the protection that they need, and that their needs are very, very different to adults. And therefore, we look at things like childcare and even maternity leave and universal credit about the adults. How is this providing for the adults? How is this good for the adults? How are the adults going to get more autonomy? How do the adults have more choice? Now, I'm not saying those aren't worthy concerns, but it's never about the child. And I remember when Jeremy Hunt announced in the budget earlier this year this extension of the so-called free hours that aren't free for children in childcare down to age 9 months and over. And he said, there are all these parents who are economically inactive, and we need to get them back into the workplace. And you just think, well, there are some people out there, absolutely, the statistics show there are some mothers who would like to work if they had better childcare. There are plenty who would like to work less, far more. There are. But who's asking the 9-month-old, where do you want to be? Do you want to be with mummy? And that's the question that we should be asking. And looking at the research, which suggests that, over 3s, yes, there are some benefits to childcare, to helping the child socialise, absolutely. But there's almost no positive research about the benefit of being in institutional childcare under 2, and certainly under 1. So why are we advocating for policies that don't even have scientific credibility, let alone being what children want? But I think, unfortunately, we have become so obsessed with this GDP figure that the Treasury and the government are very concerned about the labour market and making sure the GDP figure stays high, that they've almost forgotten about children. So the question is, how do we change that? There are countries in the Western world that do things better than us, that's for sure, but I don't think there's anywhere that's perfect. And you can see it in the birth rates. This is my other pet topic, is talking about the birth rates. And I think that people not having children, people having children later, and people not having as many children as they want, is a sign of the fact that motherhood is undervalued in the Western world, and that women are conflicted, we feel guilty whatever we do, because everything is set up to make us make really, really difficult choices. And we had an email from the Conservative Party a couple of weeks ago, which I shared with Anne, that said something like, was it, when you have to choose between your family and your career, the economy loses out. And I was just absolutely astounded. This mythical figure, this mythical economy, this spreadsheet that we all worship, is more important than the time we can spend with our babies in the first 3 years of their lives. And I was absolutely astonished. But, you know, this is the state of play in governments across the world. It's not just in this country. And it is about putting the economy, the short-term economy first. Because we all know that if you bring up a child well, if you invest in that child, if they become a well-rounded, educated, secure adult, they will contribute to the economy of the future much better than if they don't receive the nurture in those early years of life. So, you know, this is what we're dealing with, and I don't want to be depressing, but it is difficult. But the positive thing, and I echo what Liz said, get involved. Of course, you don't want to leave your very small children and come into Parliament. You know, mine were at school by the time I did it. It's still been really, really hard. But you can get involved in local politics. I started on my parish council. It's one Wednesday evening every other week. And it's amazing what you can actually achieve locally if you work with other people, you know, whether it's grants for the local Parent Teachers Association, groups for local mums. There are things that you can do locally, but most importantly, you are around that table representing not just the mother's voice is important, but the child's voice, which otherwise just doesn't get heard if mothers aren't involved. So I would really encourage you not to be too depressed about the state of affairs, though they are bad. But to get involved in whatever small way that you can. And I got involved in parish council politics when my kids were small. When they went to school, I, you know, obviously got more involved in national politics. So it is something you can do even when they're tiny without leaving them for particularly long. But you've got to show up. You know, don't just commentate, participate, they say. Even if it's just delivering some leaflets for a political party, just getting involved that way, it really is worth it because who is around that table affects what decisions are made. Happy to take any questions if anybody wants to.
Either online or in person.
Yeah, it's Dr. Carol Ulanowski.
Oh, yeah.
It's Dr. Carol Ulanowski. Hello, thank you. You mentioned putting the economy first. Actually, if you don't put children's well-being first, then you have to run loads and loads of helicopter, sort-it-all-out projects when children's needs have not been met and troubles arrive further down the line. So it's actually poor economics not to care for children as they need to be cared for.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think the problem is that I should have said it's the short-term economics. The Treasury kind of works in 5-year cycles, and it's hard to make the case that if you completely reformed the tax system and the benefit system to be pro-family and pro-child, you may not see the returns of that in 5 years, but you certainly would in 20. But unfortunately, as I'm all too aware, we have a 5-year political cycle. But that is, you're right, that is the thinking that has to change. You know, secure children are the future of the economy. Otherwise, yeah, we end up spending more when it goes wrong.
Can you check? Sorry, because obviously online folks can hear us. Thank you. Oh, no, just talking to it.
Who was it that sent that letter out?
So the Conservative Party emailed
Going to do some running.
the Conservative Party emails its members every week just with an update on a Friday, you know, from a particular minister or just news of the week. So it was just a regular update, and it was advertised in the childcare policy. But it was that line that just really stuck out.
Oh, there we go. Oh, I'm going to get fit. Excuse me.
Thanks very much. Sorry to make you run. Miriam, it's just such a complete pleasure to hear you whenever you come onto the radio. It's just absolutely fantastic. Thank you for everything you're doing. There doesn't seem to be anybody else. Do you have, I hope you have some people in the background who are giving you lots of support. Are you branded the sort of loony right wing of the party, or how are you getting on? And is there a gathering of support behind you?
Steps in. Yeah, great questions. There are an increasing number of people who are supportive. I think I think the point of agreement has started to be around the idea of family tax. I think since I got into Parliament, I've worked with people like Fiona Bruce, who's an MP who's been doing this for years and is an absolute hero, and Andrea Leadsom, and some other kind of very pro-early years MPs, and really been able to demonstrate to colleagues just how unfair and disadvantageous the tax system is. So we have more and more people on board with that, and actually I co-chair a group of relatively new MPs, so post-2016 elected Conservative MPs, with my colleague Danny Kruger, who also absolutely supports all this. And in our most recent policy paper, we got all of our colleagues to sign, well, not all of our, the whole party, but our members to sign up to the scrapping of the higher income child benefit charge. And there's a brilliant MP called Ranald J. Wardina who's produced a paper a few months ago looking at the family tax disadvantage and advocating for change. So there are increasing number of voices on our benches who are advocating for this. Getting the message to Treasury is a different thing. In terms of speaking up, I've been absolutely amazed. I have spoken about quite a lot of controversial issues, but this is the one that really, really people seem to have a visceral reaction to. And when you say some mums actually like to be with their children, I mean, you'd think, I don't know what you'd think I said, but this, you want women to go back to the kitchen sink, all this. I mean, it's just. And I think there's two reasons for that. It cuts to the heart of our modern idea that individual autonomy is everything. Well, you can't have autonomy if you have a newborn baby. That's just the facts. But also, again, it does speak to the difference between the people who make it into the Westminster media bubble, who for absolutely their choice don't want the life of a stay-at-home mum, and the rest of the country who are mostly people who like to juggle family and children, and some who absolutely want to stay at home all the time. So I think, for understandable reasons, the people in the media do not understand or empathise with this agenda at all, and so they have this kind of very visceral reaction to it, and they think that all women think like them, which they don't.
John Draper, Tax and the Family. Miriam, we've been working on this area, as you know, for quite a long time. Over the years, we've come to restructure the argument because of the reasons that you give. Whereas nowadays, we're putting more emphasis on the basic fairness, which sort of cuts through these arguments as to whether it's good or bad for mothers to stay at home or get into the labour force. I mean, it is very stuff. We've put some new figures out very recently, and it's quite clear, at least quite clear to me, that our tax system just doesn't measure up in terms of fairness. In other words, the tax liability is unrelated, not sufficiently related to how well off we are. And I think this is an argument we may increasingly need to mount, that the argument is forget everything else, at least get the tax system fair, so that the people who are best off pay the most taxes, and those who are least well off, which is almost invariably households with children, pay less.
I don't quite know where to start. I mean, we've been campaigning within government. Marie and I spent many, many weeks from 2010, 2012, attending all the meetings up in London, speaking to Andrea Leadsom. We were persona non grata in those rooms in those days. We were considered backward. We were considered anti-feminist. Nothing has changed. This government that we have in place now is not pro-families. And this is the cause of our concerns today. It really needs to change. And whoever gets into power in the next 18 months needs to take this on board, be it you, be it the Liberals, be it the Dem, be it Labour. This needs to change because our families are really suffering. The people on universal credit are not getting the money that they need to keep food on the plates for their children. This just needs to change.
Yeah, Miriam, I just wonder if you could just say, we've been in Parliament together, and the dialogue seems to have shifted a bit, doesn't it? So with the Conservative Party, it's very much about getting women into work, into the labour market, making wages more competitive. But there is a growing narrative now that the early years education is really important, and actually we need professionals to do it. It's a safeguarding issue, I think that's the latest we heard, and that parents can't be trusted, they need to be monitored. And the other thing that was quite worrying was, the professionals do it better, and there's a growing, I don't know if it's distrust of parents, but parents themselves don't believe in themselves anymore. I think there's a lack of confidence. Can you say a little bit about that?
Yes, and the lady who did say that, I just have to say, was not a Conservative MP. She was from a campaign group, yes. But I have picked up that sense from parents, particularly middle-class parents, actually, that they think that they ought to be letting the professionals do it and that they'll mess it up if they do it on their own. And I think part of that is the way that extended family has become weakened and communities have become weakened. People can't watch other people parent in the same way that they used to. And, I know when my kids were small, before I potty trained the eldest, my mum group, we talked about this for 6 months before any of us dared to start. But it meant that we'd covered all the bases, we read all the books, those kind of things. And I just think people don't have that community now, and therefore they lack confidence. And so they turn to who they think are of the professionals. And I think, this is the kind of weird left-right split. Neither of them are right. The right think that family life is essentially a private matter. If you can't afford to look after your own kids, don't have them. It's nothing to do with us. Get back into the workplace. And the left think it's all about the state taking the children and doing a better job than you can do. And they're both wrong. The answer is there is no better parent for the child than you, but that you do need support, not someone to do it for you, but you need support, whether that is the community, your extended family, or if that's not there, then things like health visitors and drop-in centres and those kind of things, but not taking your child off you. And I think this is the narrative that we've got to break. I think two positive things. Firstly, there is a birth rate crisis across the West, and other governments are, being a bit slower in this country, but we are coming around to it, recognising that we have no economy in the future if we don't have enough babies. And sooner or later, governments will have to shift their policies in favour of what's best in order to help people have the children they want, because we know they do want children, the polling shows that. And sooner or later it'll twig that that means helping mums to spend the time that they want to with their children, or at least having the choice about it. So I think, just the demographics and the economics of it will force governments into that place. But also, and this is a tragedy in some ways, the way that the government's childcare policy in this country works means that the nurseries, which were just about breaking even because they took the profits from their under threes to cross-subsidise the loss that they made for the over threes that the government pays for, are now having the price fixed for the 9 months to 3-year-old as well because of the government's new policy, which means it will wipe out their profits. And sadly, nurseries are closing all the time. And much as I want to advocate for stay-at-home mums, we do need a decent childcare sector in this country. And sadly, it is, it's falling away because the economics of the policy just don't work. So again, at some point, this government or the next government is going to have to wake up and say, this market's broken, this economic model doesn't work. What can we do to reform it? And again, that's an opportunity to look at more informal childcare, choice, and those kind of things. So it is, it's a long road ahead, but I think the demographics, the economics are shifting in our favour. But we need to be in the room when those policies are made, and the best way to do that is, is to get involved in local politics and local policies, and keep lobbying MPs.
Thank you so much, Miriam. I think let's give her a big round of applause. Thank you. Well, we've sort of running over time. It's past 3:30. Does anyone have any burning questions generally before? Yeah. Where am I going?
It's not so much a question, but it's something that's reoccurred in my mind today, especially as I've talked to lots of lovely people here. For me, and I think for a lot of other people, it's not just the financials and the childcare, it's also the working conditions and the expectations that you will be able to carry on executing your job in the same manner once you've had a child as you did before. I was a teacher before I had my daughter 6 years ago. Interestingly, so many of the other mums I meet at school now and at playgroups and things were teachers, and they're the ones that seem to choose more frequently to stay at home. You know, I guess you go into teaching because you love children, and when you have your own child, you want to give them that complete attention. For me, I knew I couldn't go back to the classroom because I just wasn't prepared to put one or the other first. I knew that I wouldn't be a good mum if I carried on teaching. I knew I wouldn't be a good teacher. It just wasn't compatible. And the unfortunate thing, I think, is because nothing is being done, particularly within the education system through government, to allow flexible working and allow you the ability. My concern was always, what if my child is ill and can't go to childcare? I have to juggle it with my husband who stays at home. I can't leave a class of 30. You know, how does that happen? And I just feel it's really interesting that so many teachers don't return to work. You know, the nation is losing a group of women or group of parents who have experience in the classroom. They're losing that skill, that ability to teach 30 children, you know, year upon year upon year. But also, if you choose to go back to teaching, your own child misses out. It's a really hard thing to manage. I'm sure it happens across other vocations, medicine, things like that as well. But it would be interesting to see if somebody is looking at working conditions as well as the financials of things.
We've got 2 questions online, and then I'm going to pass to Becca to round up.
Is this the last one I'm doing of the day?
I think there's actually just one, because one for Miriam, and I think she's just left. So do you think there is a role for inspiring young girls to grow up to become mothers so that the next generation grow up to value motherhood?
We're going to go with Liz for this one.
Do you think there's a role for women to inspire young children to become mothers?
Yeah, I really do, because we are the ones that are raising the little girls. Even if they do go to school, they still come home to us. And I would say the more confident we are as mothers, I think that will translate to the younger generation when we own it for ourselves now. And when anyone turns up, we just tell them, we're the mothers.
I think that's a lovely note to end on.
A phrase I heard about 30 years ago from a child psychoanalyst was, it takes an adult resources to stay at home and infantile needs to go to work.
Right, well, I'm sorry we've overrun a bit, but thank you so much for being with us for today. We hope you've enjoyed it and you feel encouraged and motivated in your vital role as mothers. I want to say a special thank you to the conference team who have helped make today a success. So there's Kat, Katie and Carol. Thank you for supporting me and helping me organise today. I couldn't have done it without you. And the whole MAHM committee, it really has been a team effort.